Now on this channel we will see facts and headcanons of another beloved franchise. Hello, so I've decided to take a break on my Fireman Sam alternate universe and take a crack on another AU of another show I love with all my heart, and you already probably know what it is, but yeah. Thomas the Tank Engine is another franchise I love, being number one with Fireman Sam, in my opinion, both tying. But unlike Fireman Sam, where there is only one era I actually like, so the AU would be more easier to do, Thomas has loads of pros and cons to create up my version of an AU. It has already explained things, but some things I've decided to do differently, as I either think it works better differently, or another incarnation does it better. So here is the rules of this AU. Number 1. There are some things I consider canon and some things I don't. Unlike Fireman Sam, where I strictly base it on one era, some things like the Railway series is definitely canon, but some bits from the other eras are either not or are canon. Number 2. I haven't made up any OCs as others have done that, and there are loads of characters in this franchise that have missed potential, so I just use that. But now, let's go through some facts and the headcanons of my Thomas the Tank Engine AU. So, first off, I will put this through a chronological order so it makes a bit more sense. So, let's go. Number 1. Before the NWR was formed, Sodor was run by 4 railways, the Sodor and Mainland Railway, the Tidmouth, Knapford and Elsbridge Railway, the Railsworth and Sudbury Railway, and the Great Waters and Tramways. The latter opened in the early 1880s when Great Waterton was a big town. One of the tram engines was Flora, and when the NWR was completed in 1916, Vicarstown became the main terminus up until 1924, and Great Waterton was left abandoned. Number 2. Edward was an experimental furnace railway K2 and had a twin called Alice. They worked on the furnace for 4 years and were a bit pompous and rude, but soon became wiser and respectful engines. In 1914, they arrived on Sodor, and Alice was painted in scarlet red and was the NWR's number 1, and Edward was painted in sky blue and became the NWR's number 2. Number 3. Thomas is a London, Brighton and South Coast Railway E2 and Terrier hybrid, with a pink sole of a Furnace Railway G5, built in 1914. He arrived soon after he was built, and helped build the NWR with Edward and Alice. Number 4. Timothy is Thomas in a different livery. When Alice was number 1, Thomas was painted white with a number 0. Number 5. 87546 is Henry's cousin, who's an experimental and stronger engine. Number 6. Molly is 98462. She was kept on Sodor and was bought in 1925 for good behaviour. She was repainted yellow as not to get mixed up with Edward. Number 7. In late 1924, the deal was set in plan for the express to go to Barrow and Furness. However, 87546 pulled the train out of carelessness and caused an accident, which sadly took his and Alice's life at Vicarstown Station. The big station at Tidmouth was built as soon as possible, as it is the main station and not Knapford in this AU. Number 8. In 1925, during the events of Thomas the Tank Engine, the book, James arrived and him and Thomas had a Woody and Buzz type of rivalry, as both were trying to become the new number 1. James eventually let Thomas become the number 1 after a few events, as he was impressed with his work, and after the field incident. They soon became close friends. Thomas got repainted into his iconic blue livery and was given the NWR number 1. Number 9. Out of inspiration from NWR 1991's headcanon, in 1926, for the NWR's 10th anniversary, a small railway shed museum was put up at Lower Tidmouth. Neil and Glyn became part of this museum, and a Stephenson's rocket and Stirling replica was built, the latter being Stephen and Emily. Number 10. Emily first pulled passenger trains while touring Sodor scenery. She mostly stopped at Farquhar, leading to her and Thomas having a close friendship. During World War II, she was needed for work, and after the war ended, she became a full-time worker on the NWR, leaving her to pull mixed traffic trains, and Stephen took over her tall train. Number 11. During the big engine strike, the Fat Controller needed another engine to help Thomas, Edward and Molly to pull trains, so he bought a LNER engine called Alfred, who eventually became part of the NWR team. He was a kind fellow, who often tried to be wise and put engines like Gordon in his place. However, he sadly lost his life during a munitions cock-up in World War II. Number 12. Henry stays blue after Tank Engine Thomas again, but he is repainted back to green when he goes to crew as a special homage livery. He stayed in apple green ever since. Number 13. Hero was built in the 1930s, but fled Japan during World War II. He was left in the forest and his driver went to find help, but he sadly never returned. He was left abandoned until he was discovered by Gordon in the 1970s during a race with Spencer, and he promised to help restore him, which he was. Number 14. A fleet of USA tank engines were loaned in World War II, and after the war ended, they went back to the mainland, except one. It was Rosie. She was bought and helped out Percy at Tidmouth. Number 15. Thomas and Percy saved Rosie's life during a bombing in World War II. Rosie was thankful for them and often acted a bit flirty towards the two tank engines and wanted to be just like them. Thomas thought she was annoying, but Percy didn't mind, and him and Rosie were gained a close friendship together. Number 16. Sometime in the early 1950s, Percy and Rosie discovered old slow coach, who I named Margaret, in a scrapyard. She was later restored and became Thomas's special coach. Number 17. Dennis was bought and saved from scrap in 1959. He became a shunter at Tidmouth when Rosie and Percy moved to the Farquhar branch line, and when Duck was the pilot at Tidmouth. Duck didn't get along well with Dennis at first, but he eventually did after some events. Dennis was lazy because he kept making mistakes while shunting on his old railway, and decided to act lazy on Sodor as he didn't want the Fat Controller scrapping him. Number 18. In the 1960s, the Fat Controller preserved some steam engines from scrap to work on the main line. These engines were Neville, Rebecca, Murdoch, Harvey and Arthur. Number 19. Thomas and Arthur have a father-son type relationship. They had trouble getting along at first when Thomas ruined Arthur's spotless record, but they soon became friends, and sometimes Thomas helped him with a few things. Number 20. After the events of Enterprising Engines, someone on British Railways wanted to modernise Sodor, and he sent 3 Diesel to show this plan off. And that was Diesel 10 and Splodge who was the Diesels. The plan backfired when an old engine from Sodor's early years was discovered, who was Lady, and Diesel 10 was sent back to mainland, and Splodge was pardoned as they weren't truly evil and became residents of Sodor. Number 21. The Scarlori engines are in their Red Railway Series liveries, but one day in the early 70s, an incident happened where people mistook Rheneas for Duncan and mistook Sir Handel for Scarlori, so they were given their own liveries. Rusty and Duke were repainted as well, so they weren't left out. Scarlori stayed red, Rheneas became orange, Sir Handel and Peter Sam chose their old mid-Sodor liveries, Rusty became orange, Duncan became yellow, and Duke became light brown. Number 22. Blue Mountain Mystery takes place around the 1970s, with the flashbacks taking place in the 1930s, and is when Thomas became more of a mature engine. Number 23. After Blue Mountain Mystery, Thomas is a mature engine and is like a combination of Edward and Toby. He tells engines off when they're idiotic, but he lets karma hit them when they are extremely rude and arrogant. Number 24. Sodor Day is a day that happens every 5 years, which celebrates the anniversary of the Railway Series, as the Sudrian people felt honoured by the book series. The first Sodor Day was in 1950, the next in 1955, the next in 1960, and etc. Number 25. In 1995, during the Railway Series' 50th anniversary, Arthur discovered Great Waterton and restoration was started. Stanley was a new tank engine that arrived on Sodor, making Arthur jealous as he took his spotlight. Arthur does the same stuff as Thomas, and the Great Discovery plays out the same, but Arthur learns to become more mature and wiser, and he moves to great waters and the mental Stanley. And now for miscellaneous facts. Number 1. Thomas and Percy have a brotherly relationship, and even consider each other brothers, as both don't have full siblings. Whenever they argue, it's like two siblings bickering to each other. Number 2. This AU follows the non-faces theory by a specific person who shall not be named because, you know. But in this logic, the engines can move by themselves without driver and fireman, but they have a driver and fireman with the engine to help them regain fuel and for emotional support. Also, if you were wondering, the reason Thomas moved by himself was because a cleaner jammed his controls. Number 3, yes, engines can have relationships, but it's more of a platonic relationship, with engines being with an engine that they are most closest with, and them making themselves the best version of themselves. Number 4. The reason engines like Diesel, D261 and D199 were rude and vain was because famous steam engines visited Sodor, making them jealous and wanting to show the engines of Sodor that they are much as important as these engines like City of Truro, Stepney, Flying Scotsman and etc. Number 5. James and Henry suffer PTSD from their past experiences, but they are secretly ashamed of this and often act rude and vain as they are scared of pulling specific trains. Plus, both had bad past lives. James was treated as an insignificant engine on his past railway, and Henry had engine troubles, and both have coping mechanisms, which is James trying to keep his red paint clean, and Henry spending time in the forest. Number 6. Lady was built as a wedding present for Sir Bertram Topham Hatt I by a close friend at Crovens Gate in 1910. She worked on the Wellsworth and Sudbury Railway, but did help build the NWR. She got along well with Edward and they became close friends. She was hidden away during World War II, but was rediscovered by Thomas during the late 60s. She was restored and works on Edward's branch line. Number 7. William, better known as Billy, was a tank engine from the Wellsworth and Sudbury Railway. He was like Blue Nose from Tugs and ordered everyone around. But sometime during World War II, he caused a munitions accident, resulting in the loss of a few engines and people. He was banished from Sodor, but was given a new identity in secret. He was painted purple and was given the name Charles, or Charlie for short. He was sent to Sodor as a new engine, and the only engine he knows about his past is Edward, but he keeps it secret as he doesn't know if anyone else would forgive him if they found out. Number 8. Tugs and Theodore Tugboat are canon in this universe, and in the 50s, the Star Tugs were sold to work at Tidmouth Harbour, and Theodore Tugboat takes place in the present-day area of Big City Port. Number 9. Fireman Sam and Joshua Jones are also canon in this universe, and Sam has even visited Sodor once as a child. And lastly, number 10. Daisy left the Farquhar branch line in the early 70s to become a seaside tour guide rail car, and Emily took over her duties as she was given coaches that are the old coaches from Series 1 that used to be pulled in the NWR's early days. Well, this was a fun video to do. Hope you enjoyed it. More videos hopefully coming soon, and goodbye.